Thank you. Hey, Chief.
I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this evening's meeting, this Tuesday, October 5th. It's the 19th meeting of the City Board of Directors. So we'll begin with invocation by Reverend Peaches Smith, and I'll lead the pledge. All rise.
Let us bow our heads and pray. Most gracious and heavenly Father, we thank you for another day that's been made by you. God, we thank you for the new opportunities and new mercies, not to say how we can be served, but how we can serve others. God, right now we invite you into this meeting, into this time and place. Help us to come together and be on one accord. Let us think about being the change. Help us to make the decisions that will glorify you. Help us to make the decisions that will lift up our city so that we will continue to be that city that is the light on the hill. So God, right now I ask that you give each person direction, give them peace, give them guidance. In your mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
We'll call this meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Director Aaron Holliday.
Here.
Director Elaine Jones.
Here.
Director Marsha Dobbs-Smith.
Here.
Director Carol Weatherford.
Here.
Director Karen Garcia.
Here.
Director Steve Trusty.
Here.
Mayor Pat McCabe.
Here. This time we'll consider approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or items to be moved from consent agenda to new business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent, or to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second. Director Garcia, seconded by Director Trustee. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Agenda is approved. Consider approval of the minutes of the regularly held meeting of September 21, 2021. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Director Dobbs-Smith, seconded by Director Jones. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Recognition of guests. Well, before we go there, we got all the directors are here, and City Manager Bill Burrow is remote via Zoom. And welcome, Bill. He'll give the city manager's report here in a minute. At this time, we'll have a recognition of guests, which is Michelle Ratcliffe. She's the Economic Development Manager with the Hot Springs Metro Partnership, and she'll deliver the September 2021 Economic Development Report. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, since it's been about 3 weeks since we have reported to you, but and my apologies, or Gary's apologies, for not being here to report to you directly. He is attending the International Economic Development Council annual conference in Nashville. So he is learning all new things economic development wise to bring back for us to go to work some more for the city and for our community. Right after that meeting that he's reported to you, we had another interested party in working with the development of the ACTI property. So that was another call interested in that property. Right after the week after that, there was a group of 14 individuals that did attend Washington, D.C. on the D.C. fly-in for the chamber trip. The primary topic of that meeting in Washington was the ACTI property. They were able to meet with Congressman Westerman, Senator Bozeman, Congressman Crawford, a lady from the National Park Service Legislative Affairs Branch, and on that trip, they did learn that there will be some monies have been appropriated and earmarked for a Phase 2 environmental study of the property. So we were pleased to have that. Gary and I later met with an individual, Austin Slater. He is with the Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce, the Be Pro, Be Proud initiative. You've probably heard me mention that before. It's a workforce initiative that is a simulated 18-wheeler with all different projects inside that, where students, high school students, can actually go in and hands-on try their hand at electrical work, driving a semi-truck, driving an excavator, welding. I did try that and decided I better keep my day job because I was not very good at it. But it's something that we met with him to encourage our high school students to think more about career opportunities and workforce initiatives, again, to get our schools involved. Ashley Thompson, Mara Kuhn, and Gary then also went to visit with the Conway Chamber of Commerce to visit with them about their initiatives for diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and how we can work to do things better in our community, address those things as well through our chamber membership. We've had back-to-back meetings actually on some economic development projects that were follow-ups from an initial meeting. So those are very encouraging that they are still going forward. Actually had another initial meeting today on a brand new issue that has come to the city that we hope that will come to fruition as well. Let's see, apologize, I'm trying to follow my notes here. We did have our chamber golf tournament, and even though it rained in the morning and rained in the afternoon, we managed to squeeze in some golf during the day to help benefit the Arkansas Math School and Sciences. So we were real pleased to be able to do that. That's an annual benefit that we do partner with them on that. And again, Gary is in Nashville this week. We'll be returning to the office, and of course enjoyed the great service this morning at the Garland County Leadership Prayer Breakfast. So that is the end of my report. I probably missed something important, so I will entertain any questions that you might have.
Any questions of Michelle?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This time we'll call on Mr. Bill Burrow, the city manager, for the city manager's report. Bill? Bill, you're muted.
How's that?
And we can hear you now.
Very good, thank you. Mayor, members of the board, the last couple of weeks, several days actually, over the last couple of weeks, staff has been working diligently on the budget document. We've had our first round of meetings with all the departments, and our finance staff, Aretha and her staff, have been rolling those numbers up, working on the revenue projections, and I'll be reviewing those again later this week, at the end of this week, early next week. But we are on track, and we will be ready to present this to you, the board, during a work session towards the end of this month. So we're working on that budget document and should be on schedule as the schedule exists today. Operation Clean Sweep. Operation Clean Sweep is about to start. It will start Monday, October the 11th and run through October the 29th. There's approximately 425 structures in the area, and it's primarily between Freeman and Main and between Albert Pike Road and the railroad tracks that separate right before you get to the middle school. Operation Clean Sweep is a 3-week multi-department effort to clean up the areas. The first week, our neighborhood services will go out and write notices on any deficiencies that may be there. The second week, solid waste will be running that particular area each and every day, and things that need to be discarded. Residents are able to do that at no cost by placing those curbside. And then the third week, our neighborhood services follow back up on the notices from that previous week. So we're excited about that. That'll be starting again on Monday, October the 11th. The water plant, some have commented on the Cornerstone water tank when we had the time-lapse camera that was overlooking that project. And at the end of the day, you know, you look back over a year and a half of work and see those all those pictures. It's really something to document. And this is the first water plant, I believe, that's been built in over 60 years. So we're going to do the same at the actual plant that we're building off of Amity Road on Randall Road. We have a camera that's been installed on a 60-foot tower. It's going to take a picture every 30 minutes, and you're able, anyone in the public's able to view that by going to cityhs.net/utilities, and you'll be able to look at that camera and the time-lapse photos up to that point. I want to thank Todd Pillar for working that through. it'll document that construction site as we move forward. And I tell you, I saw the first couple of pictures and drove out there, and it is a very large site with a lot of earth that's already been moved, and they're doing a great job on that project, and just glad to see this documentation happen. I want to talk a little bit about some outdoor workout equipment that Anthony Whittington, our Parks and Trails Director, was able to secure and obtain from the federal surplus in North Little Rock. We got that several months ago, 8 or 9 months ago, and it's now been installed. It's just north of the Hollywood Park in that area on the Greenway. Each time I've driven by there, I've seen 4 or 5 people on that workout equipment. It's 6 pieces and really nice addition to the Greenway. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, it's worth driving down and taking a look. The Hot Springs Police Department will be featured in a documentary film at the Hot Springs Documentary Film Festival. As you know, it starts this Friday, and the police department's efforts in helping those recover from opioid addiction is featured in one of this year's film. It's called 7 Days. It's scheduled to show at 2:30 p.m. on Wednesday, October 13th, and then will be available online between October 14th and the 16th. The producer of the film, he spent several days with Chief Chapman, as well as our peer recovery specialist, Sean Willits, and Corporal Jesus Anaya. It's a powerful film, and it really does a great job of revealing that opioid crisis that we have in small communities and large communities throughout the United States. So excited to see that particular film. And finally, the city currently has 12 job openings. 7 city departments have a total of 12 jobs between them. We're seeking applicants with jobs ranging from a maintenance technician, bus and truck drivers, to chief court clerk and public works director. Visit cityhs/careers to find out more information and apply. And the last thing I got, Mayor, is Mr. Wilson with Rick Wilson Enterprises. He continues to stay in contact on his due diligence efforts, and that is moving forward. I know he spoke to both myself and I believe our city attorney, and just glad that they're staying in that constant communication with us so we know where they're at in that due diligence process. And I can report that it is moving forward. So with that, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Any questions of the city manager? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Now we'll entertain announcements from individual directors on upcoming events. Directors have an upcoming event? Okay, we'll move on. Consent agenda. These are of a routine nature. They do not merit individual discussion. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Director Trustee, seconded by Director Weatherford. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Consent agenda is adopted. We have about 5 action items on new business. The first is to consider Resolution R21-150. Entertain.
Mayor, I'll
Council,
provide you-
please read by title.
Yes, Mayor. This is Resolution R-21-150, a resolution condemning certain real property, parcel 41164, pursuant to ordinance number 6069, located at 107 Erie Street. That concludes your reading, Mayor. If you would, entertain a motion second to adopt and have discussion, if any.
Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Director Weatherford, second by Director Trustee. Staff report will be provided by Kathy Selman.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. This is a vacant and unsafe structure. The owner is either unwilling or unable to bring it into compliance with city code, and condemnation of this property is a last resort. The structure is a duplex consisting of 107 and 109 Erie. We are requesting condemnation of the entire structure. Neighborhood Services has been working with this property as far back as 2007. There is now significant damage to the exterior of the structure, and a portion of the exterior load-bearing wall is blown out, and this indicates severe structural damage. It's difficult to see on the pictures. We have a shot of the front of the house. The load-bearing walls where the problems exist are on the two sides that are perpendicular to that front wall. In addition to the structure, the exterior premise, except for the front yard, has been neglected to the point that there is limited access to the rear and right side yards. The property is owned by Mr. Gary Meeks, and the taxes are current. Currently, there are no liens on the property. The 20-day notice of condemnation was issued to Mr. Meeks' home address, and we have received back the signed green signature card from the post office.
Very good. Any questions of Ms. Selman? Director Garcia?
What was the property owner's feedback regarding, been working on this since 2007, and the taxes are all current, but the owner's hasn't maintained the property. Did he provide any feedback?
All I'm aware of is the green card coming back. Typically, there is some explanation. We are told that there may be a potential sale. However, as with any property in this condition with a history such as this, we would request that the board approve the condemnation, and if the new owner is going to fix it up, they can get a permit and do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Ms. Selman? Thank you.
Thank you.
We didn't have anybody sign up from those in attendance to speak on this issue. Was there anybody want to speak on this issue? Sir, come forward, and ma'am, come forward and state your name, address, and city district.
Anna Rogers, District 1, 407 Bower Street. We live right around the corner. I actually came for a different issue tonight, but we live right around the corner from that Erie address. We've kept tabs on it. We can see it from our backyard, so we've seen quite a bit of squatting activity, illegal activity, people on and off the property pretty regularly. And as far as Gary Meeks goes, he has multiple properties in that same exact area next door to my home, behind my home, down the street from my home, and has no intention. I've talked to him many times. I know he's not here to represent himself. It may not be fair for me to speak on his behalf, but I've lived in the neighborhood for 8 years. My husband and I have contacted him numerous times to purchase his properties and to request that he do something decent with them. He has rented them out to people that will not have hot water. He has rented out without vetting renters. And so drug dealers moving in 2 doors from my house where my children live has been a common occurrence. So I'm here to say that I do not expect Gary Meeks to do anything with his property.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Rogers? Anyone else want to speak on this issue? Thank you. Discussion amongst directors?
Anyone here to speak in opposition of Resolution R21-150, condemning certain real property located at 107 Erie Street? 107 Erie Street. There's none, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion amongst directors? Please call the roll.
Directors Holliday. Aye. Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs Smith.
Aye.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye. Resolution is adopted. Now we'll consider Resolution R21-151 and ask the city attorney to read by title.
Resolution R-21-151, a resolution setting a time and date for a public hearing to adopt the Hot Springs Board of Directors 2020 Apportionment Redistricting Plan Map. That concludes your reading, Mayor. If you would, entertain a motion second to adopt and have discussion, if any.
So move.
Got a motion by Director Garcia, seconded by Director Weatherford. And Harmony Morrissey, City Clerk, will provide a staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. Arkansas law assigns the task of dividing residents into city districts to the governing body of the municipality. Thus, the Board of Directors must divide the territory of the city into 6 districts, having substantially equal population based on the most current census data, with one district having a majority of its residents identify as minority. The resolution before you sets the time and date of October 19th for a public hearing, allowing the board to consider comments from any interested party on the proposed map that's on your screen. Notice of the public hearing along with this proposed map will be advertised in the newspaper and on the city website. For those residents unable to attend the public hearing but interested in commenting, a devoted email address has been set up and will be taking comments after this meeting. On October 19th, the public hearing will be held before the new business is considered. Under new business will be an ordinance to consider adopting the Board of Directors 2020 apportionment plan map. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Ms. Morrissey? Anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this issue of setting a time and date for the hearing? Any discussion amongst directors? Please call the roll.
Director Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs Smith.
Aye.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye. Resolution is adopted. We have 3 ordinances to consider tonight. The first is Ordinance 021-43, and I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules to read by title only.
So moved.
Director Jones, seconded by
Second.
seconded by Director Dobbs Smith. All in favor of the motion to suspend the rules to read by title only, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It's approved. And the staff report will be provided by Kathy Salmon, Director of Planning and
Mayor, let
Development.
me read the title real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is ordinance O-21-43, an ordinance amending the zoning map from R2 suburban residential to C4 regional commercial open display district for .94 acres, generally located on a split zone lot at Airport Road and Black Hawk Street, amending the future land use plan map to linear commercial corridor and for other purposes. That concludes reading, Mayor. If you would entertain the motion second to adopt and have discussion, if any.
Thank you. Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Second.
I got Director Trustee and Director Jones. Thank you. And now we'll have the staff report by Director of Planning and Development, Kathy Salmon.
Thank you.
Welcome again.
The applicant is Mr. John Keeling, representing property owner Southern Land Development, LLC. He's requesting C4 Regional Commercial Open Display District zoning for approximately .4 acres of land located near the corner of Black Hawk Street, Airport Road, and the MLK Expressway. The subject property is currently zoned R2, suburban residential, has a future land use classification of residential low, and is located in Board of Directors District Number 4. Now, I need to explain about the land. The parcel is .94 acres, but part of it is already zoned C4. We don't have a legal description for either the part that is zoned C4 or the part that is zoned R2. So the parcel is .94. The change we estimate is approximately .4 acres. So you'll see those numbers going back and forth in this staff report. And it's not an error, it's for real. And I thought I would explain why. His request says we'd like to rezone the whole lot to commercial C4. Part of the lot is residential, and this will resolve a split zone issue. Those of you who've been in Hot Springs for quite a while probably remember that at some point commercial zoning was assigned to land along our arterial streets, such as Airport Road and Albert Pike Road, by the very scientific method of saying the first, 200 feet or so of the land back from the road right-of-way will be zoned commercial. That resulted in a number of lots that were in this situation. This is one of the final ones to be cleared up. But we do still see these popping up from time to time. There are mandatory findings for a rezoning. This property meets 2 of them. One is compatibility with surrounding development or zoning. all of the surrounding and nearby properties are zoned commercial, except for the property immediately to the west, which is the expressway. Therefore, the requested C4 zoning will be compatible with both surrounding developments and zoning. And the second standard, which was demonstrated to be met, is that the request responds to a significant change in surrounding physical, economic, land use, or other condition. On the Airport Road area of the city has seen significant commercial development over the past several years, and this intersection is, in fact, if not the busiest, one of the busiest intersections in the city. So based upon that change, this standard is met. The portion of the property subject to this request has a future land use map designation of residential low, which is not compatible with the requested zoning. The surrounding C4 zone properties have future land use designations of linear commercial corridor and regional commercial center. And the split zone part of this 0.94 acre lot has a future land use classification of linear commercial corridor, and it would be logical to assign that to the rest of the parcel as well. And that would be consistent with the requested zone. Planning Commission duly advertised the application and called for testimony at their September 9, 2021 regularly scheduled meeting. By their 9-0 vote, Planning Commission recommends that the Board of Directors approve an ordinance rezoning the subject R2 section of the 0.94 acres to C4 and change the future land use to linear commercial corridor because the requirements of 16 to 11E1 are met.
Any questions
you.
of Ms. Selman? Director Weatherford?
How many feet, the piece of property right under that's on Albert Pike, or Airport Road, excuse me,
Right.
how many feet frontage is that they,
Oh, man. It's in here.
That was like 215.
I was thinking it was 245, but let me find that. It is 265 on Blackhawk, 200 on Airport, and 280 on the Expressway.
okay. Will he, if he does something on the property, will he have to go to the state of Arkansas for a driveway onto Airport Road?
He, I believe, has access from Airport Road, but any change to that would go to the state. Yes.
There's a driveway already there? There's a curb cut?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
It should be C4. I'm not arguing with the change there. I'm just worried about another piece of property at an intersection to be developed with another driveway onto probably the busiest road in Hot Springs.
Right.
We just did it on the other side of the bypass with 2 driveways, and there are multiple driveways on the right and multiple driveways on the left past the bypass, and there's a Valero station there. But that just bothers me that, does he have to come back to us for anything?
Depending on his proposed use, he may be required to come back. And I do, your concern is really important. But the frontage portion of this is already C4. This is a little wedge. Yeah.
I know it's.
Right. And there's.
I don't know how that happened there, but it's just.
Yeah, the front part, who can say? Yeah.
Any further questions of Ms. Selman? Thank you.
Thank you.
We didn't have anybody sign up from the audience on this, but did anybody want to speak on this matter? Board of Directors, discussion? Please call the roll.
Director Dobbs-Smith.
Aye.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. This time we'll consider ordinance 021-44. I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules to read by title only.
So moved.
Second.
Was it Director Garcia, seconded by Director Weatherford? All in favor of the motion to suspend the rules and read by title only, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Council, please read by title.
Ordinance O-21-44, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of waterworks revenue refunding bond for the purpose of refunding certain outstanding bonds, providing for the payment of the principal of and the interest on the bond, prescribing other matters related thereto, and declaring an emergency. That concludes the reading, Mayor. If you would, entertain a motion second to adopt and have discussion, if any.
So moved.
Director Weatherford, seconded by
Second.
Director Trustee. And Doretha Yates, Finance Director, will provide the staff report. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. This ordinance will authorize us to issue a waterworks revenue refunding bond in the amount of $10,030,000. We will take the proceeds of this and pay off two bonds that we previously issued. One of them was Series 2010B, and the other one was Series 2015. From time to time, the market moves in such a manner that allows us to do this and save money. The savings on this, the net present value of it is about $1.2 million, and the interest cost on it is 1.84%. This one's a little bit different than the normal ones we do because this one is a private placement. We were able to place this with Regions Bank, and based on different scenarios that we ran, we did it at a better cost than we would have had we issued it at a public market. The original maturity on the 2015 bonds was 2040, and that's the maturity on this debt. Also, I have Bob Wright and Ryan Bowman here, our bond counsel and our financial advisors, if you guys have any questions for them.
Any questions of Ms. Yates at this time? Do we have any questions of Bob or Ryan? Any member of the audience here to speak on this issue? Any discussion amongst directors? Director Trustee?
If I can get back to it, I accidentally went back to the beginning just a second. The staff recommends the issuance of, on our board action request, it says $10,060,000, and then the bond's drawn for $10,030,000. Looks like it's probably, this should be amended to, or should be changed to $10,030,000, Waterworks Revenue Refunding Bond.
You're indicating that the board action request form is different than the ordinance? Yes. The ordinance is what's on the floor.
Okay. Well, I just want it reflected in the minutes what's correct.
Yes, sir. The number in the bond is correct, and the ordinance is correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any other comments amongst board members? Discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Director Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs-Smith.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye.
Mayor, there is
Ordinance.
an emergency clause found in Section 32. I'll read it in its entirety. It is hereby ascertained and declared that the refunding must be accomplished as soon as possible in order to lower the interest cost on system bonds. The refunding cannot be accomplished without the issuance of the bond, which cannot be sold at the interest rate specified herein unless the ordinance is immediately effective. Therefore, it is declared that an emergency exists, and this ordinance being necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, and safety shall be enforced and take effect immediately upon and after its passage. That concludes your reading of the emergency clause. If you would, entertain a motion second to adopt.
So
Motion
moved.
to adopt.
Second.
Director Garcia, seconded by Director Dobbs-Smith. All in favor of the emergency clause signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. emergency clause is adopted. Our final action item of the evening is to consider ordinance 021-45. I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules to read by title only.
So moved.
Director Jones, seconded by Director Trustee. All in favor of the motion to suspend the rules, read by title only, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Council, please read by title.
Ordinance O-21-45, an ordinance regulating short-term residential rental businesses within the city of Hot Springs, Arkansas, amending ordinance number 6375 and ordinance number 6382, declaring an emergency and for other purposes. That concludes your reading. If you would, entertain a motion second to adopt and have discussion, if any.
Motion to adopt.
Moved.
Director Jones, seconded
Second.
by Director Garcia. Council, Brian Albright, City Attorney, will provide the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. Early in 2021, the Board of Directors initiated discussions regarding short-term residential rentals. On March 2nd of 2021, Board of Directors heard testimony from the public and adopted ordinance number 6375, which requires a business license for each and every short-term residential rental business within the corporate limits of the City of Hot Springs. Ordinance number 6375 also established an abeyance of all applications for short-term residential rental business licenses beginning at 5 p.m. on May 30th, 2021, and continuing until 5 p.m. on October 13, 2021. On October 23rd, 2021, the Board of Directors convened a public hearing for the purpose of hearing from owners and operators of STRs and residents of Hot Springs, at which approximately 100 people attended and 29 individuals spoke on the subject. The public forum was live streamed via Facebook by Hot Springs Broadcast Network, and it received almost 5,000 views, as well as recorded and archived on the city's YouTube channel. In addition to the public forum, 75-plus comments were also received on a dedicated email address, strcomments@hotsprings.hs.net, between March 12 and March 25th. The Board of Directors subsequently conducted duly advertised work sessions on March 30th, April 13th, April 27th, and May 11th. Those were dedicated to further consideration of the comments and public input received on STRs, after which staff was directed to bring forth a proposed ordinance to address the city's needs for the city and its environs. On May 18, 2021, at its regularly scheduled business meeting, the Hot Springs Board of Directors adopted ordinance number 6382, which established interim policies, rules, and regulations for short-term residential rental businesses within the city. Pursuant to the direction of the board, city staff has worked on the implementation of these interim policies, rules, and regulations and the creation of an online portal via Granicus Host Compliance. On September 21, 2021, the Board of Directors conducted another duly advertised work session to review the capabilities of the online portal and a draft of the various amendments to ordinances number 6375 and 6382. Pursuant to ordinance number 6375, the abeyance period will be lifted after 5 p.m. on October 13, 2021. The various amendments to ordinance number 6375 and ordinance 6382 previously discussed with the board require the approval of the board and adoption of such amendments as are necessary for the regulation of short-term residential rental businesses within the city. So the highlights of the proposed ordinance before you this evening, 21-45, are as follows. First and perhaps foremost, applications for any new short-term residential rental businesses license would be held in abeyance until January 3rd, 2022. As I've indicated, they will automatically be lifted October the 13th if not continued. The stated purpose of the ordinance is to deal with clarification of the licensing process, establish appropriate standards that regulate short-term residential rentals, minimize negative secondary effects on short-term rental use on surrounding neighborhoods, preserve the character of neighborhoods in which such use occurs, address traffic, noise, and density, ensure health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhoods as well as the renters, occupants, and guests patronizing short-term residential rentals, imposing limits on the number of licenses issued within residential zoning districts to ensure long-term availability of affordable housing stock, ensure enforcement of these standards. What this ordinance will not do is interfere with the rights of property owners via private conditions, covenants, bill of assurances, bylaws, or any restrictions on the owner's property that may be designated through an enforceable contract on the property. With regard to pre-existing non-conforming uses, any lawful pre-existing non-conforming use licensed as a short-term residential rental may continue as long as its license does not lapse, and/or such lawful pre-existing non-conforming use does not cease for more than 12 consecutive months. Provided, however, that such pre-existing non-conforming use shall not be expanded by way of a total square feet of living space or any other fashion. Limitations within residential zoning districts. The aggregate maximum allowable number of short-term residential rental business license for transient use sites located within zoning districts R1, R2, R3, R4, and RL, other than horizontal property regimes, shall not exceed 700 per calendar year. If a proposed transient use site for such a short-term residential rental is situated in a zoning district of R1, R2, R3, R4, or RL, other than a horizontal property regime, the owner applicant shall be required to obtain a valid conditional use permit pursuant to Hot Springs Code Section 16-2-70 at SEEK. A link to the application and instructions for such a conditional use permit will be made part of the online portal established by the city and on the city's website. Provided further, that any conditional use issued for a short-term residential rental transient use site located in zoning districts R1, R2, R3, R4, and RL shall be applied towards said aggregate maximum allowable number, whether or not such a site has an active license or not. Short-term residential rental licenses shall be limited to one per single family zoned lot or parcel. This provision is applicable to R1, R2, R3, and RL zoning districts. I would note that that does not apply to R4 as it is already multifamily, and that a duplex is not considered multifamily since the adoption of Ordinance number 6390 on August 3rd of this year. Provided further that no multifamily dwelling structure within zoning districts R1, R2, R3, R4, or RL or other than a horizontal property regime may be converted in whole or in part to a transient use site as a short-term residential rental. An example of that the board has previously discussed is 735 Quapaw. Maximum occupancy, irrespective of zoning district, short-term residential rentals are primarily intended for sleeping accommodations. They are not intended for parties or other large gatherings. To that end, the maximum number of occupants authorized to stay overnight, meaning after midnight, at any transient use site shall be determined by the city building official and/or the fire chief or their designees, and shall not exceed 2 per bedroom, each of which shall comply with the 2012 International Residential Code plus 2. The maximum number of people authorized on the premises of a transient use site at any time other than overnight shall not exceed the maximum number of occupants authorized to stay overnight plus 50%. By way of an example, should the maximum number of occupants authorized to stay overnight at any such transitional use site be set at 8, then the maximum number of people authorized on the premises of a transient use site at any one time other than after midnight shall not exceed 12. For purposes herein, the term overnight means after midnight. The owner shall post and maintain a placard in a conspicuous location adjacent to the exterior of the front entrance of the short-term residential rental depicting the maximum overnight occupancy authorized under the business license issued by the city. The placard will be provided to the owner by the city upon the issuance of a business license. The ordinance also provides for strict compliance with regard to all city codes. They include, but not necessarily limited to, the building code, fire code, safety code, noise ordinance, parking ordinance, solid waste ordinance. The application for a license and the renewal shall be via the online portal, which will be provided to the city via Granicus Host Compliance. Contact information shall be required for, regarding the owner representative, the local contact person, along with such other information that the city may require to enable administration of the license. The owner shall also submit to an inspection and provide the information contained within the city's approved report form as part of the online process through the portal established by the city and on the city's website. The inspection report shall be completed by a registered home inspector in good standing with the Arkansas Home Inspector Registration Board pursuant to the Arkansas Code regulating such industry. The inspection report must be completed within 120 days prior to the initial application or renewal application for a business license, as the case may be. One of the purposes of the inspection report is to ensure compliance with all applicable fire and building codes. That is in order to receive a certificate of occupancy, which shall be required for such a use as a transit use site. As part of the online application, the owner shall obtain a zoning certification letter from the City of Hot Springs Planning and Development Department. As previously stated, in the event that the zoning certification letter indicates that the proposed transit use site of a short-term residential rental is situated in a residential district of R1, R2, R3, R4, or RL, other than a horizontal property regime, the applicant owner shall be required to obtain a valid conditional use permit pursuant to the Hot Springs Code. A link for the application instructions will be part of the online process. The renewal of existing licenses shall be given priority over the initial application or over initial applications for new transit use sites. The business license fee shall be based as follows: $100 per person per year based on the maximum overnight occupancy authorized by the short-term residential rental business license. By way of an example, if the initial and subsequent annual fee occupation tax for a transit site with a maximum overnight capacity of 8, that would be $800. Their license fees are due January 1. 10% penalty is assessed on March 1st, 30% on April 1st, and any license that has not been renewed by May 1st shall be deemed to lapse. Should any short-term residential rental business license lapse or not otherwise be renewed in the following calendar year, any subsequent application shall be considered as an initial application and shall be subject to any and all requirements and conditions of an initial application. That could include the conditional use permit. Complaints and comments from the public regarding activities associated with the advertising, transacting, or carrying on of any business related to or supporting the transit use of residential property in the city of Hot Springs shall be received via an online portal established by the city and on the city's website, as well as a hotline to be established by the city of Hot Springs for that purpose. There is sections regarding penalties, including the denial, suspension, and revocation of licenses. Those are pretty self-explanatory. If you have questions about that, be happy to discuss those. Also, there is an emergency clause given the fact that the expiration of the abeyance period will occur October the 13th of 2021. That's an overview of this proposed ordinance. It has been an evolving document, obviously, through all of these meetings with the Board of Directors, all of which included invitations and advertisement to the public to attend. I'll be happy to address any questions or field any comments that you may have regarding this.
Very good. Any questions of Mr. Albright at this time?
I have a quick question.
Yes, please.
On page 78 of 86 of our packet, page 4 of the ordinance, section 3, it says that multifamily dwellings aren't allowed to rent in part or whole. What, I guess I missed that when we were talking about it. Why is that?
That they can't be converted?
Right, they can't be converted?
Sure. One of the stated purposes is to preserve affordable housing stock. And so there are restrictions within residentially zoned districts in order to try to achieve that goal. You have many goals, and they are competing goals, I will readily acknowledge. In that residential zone, if they convert from an apartment, let's say, to an STR, that is a reduction in long-term residential rentals as opposed to short-term.
But if that same person had 4 rent houses, they could turn all 4 of them into STRs, but if they had a 4-plex apartment, they wouldn't be allowed to? I had a question from a constituent, and she owns, I think she said a 3-plex, and I told her she'd have to check with the fire code, but I was pretty sure she'd have to sprinkle it. Isn't that correct, if it's over 2?
If it's 2 stories.
If it's 2 stories, but if it's just 1 story. Anyway, her question was, why should she be penalized if she wants to take her 3-plex and turn it into short-term rental?
As I
Just a
said,
question.
there are competing interests. That's what we're here to discuss tonight is legislation. If there are changes to this piece of legislation, that's the purview of the board. But the reason that it was put in there was to attempt to achieve one of your stated goals, which was to preserve affordable housing stock.
Correct.
In residential areas.
Thank you.
Director Garcia.
Is the multi-family dwelling that was just mentioned in that section 3, does that include duplex, or is it over a duplex?
Multifamily is 3 or more.
And so should we add that in our definitions? Because I've had questions on that. There was some confusion if that included.
It's already defined by ordinance that you passed August the 3rd.
Oh, okay, it's up in the, okay, so it's in those definitions that it's 3 or more.
No, ma'am, it's part of an ordinance that you've already adopted.
It's in a separate one, but I'm asking, do we need that included in here?
Well,
Or we just refer them to that?
all of this is going to be part of the city code.
Okay.
The code is read, in concert.
I was just passing on some questions.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
received.
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't know to refer them to what ordinance number to refer to.
Any further questions of the city attorney? Director
So if it's a
Weatherford?
duplex, it's okay for them to do the other side as an STR? Is what you're saying?
If it's a duplex, that provision would not apply. However, it's in a residential zone, so the conditional use would apply.
But because they're separate units, we have the other, and I'm not sure where it is real quick, but there's only 1 per parcel, correct? So this would be technically, if you have a duplex, it would be 2
2 licenses.
licenses. So it's already handled elsewhere in this ordinance that would not be allowable to have more than 1 per parcel. More than 1 license per parcel, correct?
Well, actually, that section, and I'm sorry, I read it in my notes, I'd have to find it within the code itself, but you're referring to the section that states, short-term residential rental licenses shall be limited to only 1 per single-family zoned lot or parcel. The provisions of this provision is applicable to R1, R2, R3, notably absent is R4 and RL.
Correct, but we do have duplexes that exist in single-family residential zoned areas.
Yes.
Okay. So that's what I'm just clarifying, that sort of sorts itself out moving forward, that you would still only be able to do one side unless it were in R4.
If it's an R4.
I don't know that I'm I guess I missed that. I guess I'm not in agreement that we, and I know what our goal was to do for long term. And I'd really be interested in seeing how many duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes are in R1, R2, R3, I guess I missed it, 'cause with so many not variations, so many things that we did to this that it's hard to keep up with.
Oh, I feel like I typed on this every week. Yes, sir.
Well, I know you have. You got as many as 3 emails a day sometimes
Right.
with a chain.
Any further questions of the city attorney?
Not at this time.
Thank you. We have some individuals have signed up to speak on this issue, so we'll have them come forward. And our time limit is 3 minutes, so please be sensitive to that. And our first will be Stevie Spargo. Please come forward and restate your name, your address, and what district you reside in. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stevie Spargo, 400 Pritchard Street here in Hot Springs, and I am one of those that falls in that crack of the multiple unit rentals. I'm in an R3 zone, but I have a fourplex. I'm sure that I'm not the only one that fits into that little slice of what we have, but I would like to see that changed, please, because we are unable to do anything. It appears everyone else in town, everyone else has the ability to do it except our one little section. So if y'all would please think about redoing that and taking it out, I'd certainly appreciate it.
Okay, any questions of Ms. Spargo? Thank you. Director Garcia? Stevie?
Is this property currently rented?
This property is currently rented long-term. It is in an R3 zone, and actually on my block, I'm across from the track, and on my block, there are only 4 houses in our whole block, including 2 that I own. So I know that the little house I have should go through STR, but the little fourplex is not going to. At least under this current.
Is it your intent to terminate your rental agreement or let it not renew it to turn it into STR?
I'm going to let it attrition as my renters move. I have good renters, but my concern is that at the time that they do leave, or if they ever leave, I hope they don't, but if they do, then I want to have the ability to do short-term rental.
I see. I have a better understanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This time, Ms. Anna Rogers, please come forward and restate your name, address, and district number, please.
Hello, my name is Anna Rogers, 407 Bauer, District 1. I have taken the privilege and the opportunity to be able to be at most of the meetings regarding STR stuff in order to properly be an advocate for myself, for my family, and for the people in my district that owns STRs, both single unit dwellings and multiplexes, which I think I agree with my neighbor over here should be reconsidered. There are so many things about this process that's been stressful for a lot of STR owners, as you can imagine, who've invested a great deal of our livelihoods into providing an income for ourselves and our families that otherwise we wouldn't have the opportunity to do so. Myself included, as well as many other STR owners in my neighborhood, take great pride. And so in being here tonight, I'm not trying to convince you of anything other than to remind you to please be empathetic for a broader spectrum, a bigger view of what's really happening here. There are a lot of people that are wanting to comply with the laws that do so and work really hard to provide quality experiences for the people that come to Hot Springs. Not just a place to sleep, but a beautiful place to sleep. And because of STRs, my neighborhood has improved. People have invested where otherwise they wouldn't have. And that's been an improvement. And that to me is the majority from my perspective, my little limited sliver of heaven here in Hot Springs. So I'm here mainly just to be a face, to remind you that this is important to a lot of people. Please take great care in considering each and every detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Director Garcia.
At the beginning, you said you wanted, I think you said you wanted something reconsidered. Was there a specific section in
We-
here that you were,
The
It was the-
multifamily.
The
the
multifamily.
multiplex?
Mhm.
And so some of your property is multiplex?
No, I just know a lot of people that have them, and I know that that's a big issue for a lot of the STR owners, which is why I mentioned that I think that's something we should strongly consider. There's a lot of people that are concerned about that aspect of it.
Oh, I see.
Mhm.
And are they currently operating?
Some of them, yes.
Oh,
Mhm.
but there's some that may come up that aren't. And
Well,
didn't
here's my
apply before?
Yes, some, but my main concern is, well, for example, a lot of rentable units, there are families that have a room that they want to rent out. It's a single-family unit, or they have 2 rooms. You know, they have a whole upstairs, the kids have moved out. My husband and I travel a lot with our kids because they're mountain bike on the local mountain bike team. And so we are always renting STRs, and we stay with families that have multiple rooms on their second level, that all their kids have moved out, you know? It's not, those type of situations will not be able to get a single license because they're listing 3 different rooms on their listing sites. So technically, they would be required to have a license for each and every room. But if it's a single-family unit, they're only allowed under this ordinance to have 1 license. So there's also that dilemma as well.
If it's renting a room in their home, I don't know that, this is a question maybe for the city attorney. Is that more like the bed and breakfast than a STR? Because this doesn't allow that, does it?
Depends on how they're advertising. If they're advertising them individually, under a vacation website, they're individual.
Yes, it's very, very common. We've traveled the country and stayed at many people's homes where they have an individual listing for individual rooms. So you're actually renting that 1 room, and then you get the shared space in the rest of the house.
Right, but I'm saying that within this ordinance, that's not allowed, is it?
It's not allowed because it would be more than, if it's in a residential zone, that would be more than 1 license. And as written, this ordinance
Right.
only allows 1 license per residential lot.
Right. That would be my concern, that, and as well as the conditional use is, I think, going to be a drain on the resources of the municipality.
Any further
I
questions?
understand.
Thank you. Mr. Bill Lemon, please come forward to restate your name and district address, please.
My name is Bill Lamond, 418 Sunset Bay Road, Hot Springs, District 4. Generally, and you've heard from me before on some of our streets, and all I really have to say tonight is we generally support the ordinance revisions as they have been proposed here. We would have any concern about doing anything to eliminate the conditional use. We feel that's a vital protection. That's a fundamental part of the zoning ordinances, a vital protection for property owners, not in us, in our neighborhood, but others. We also support the extending the moratorium. It will give our subdivision, Point Blue Water, the opportunity to complete changes to our covenant, which will prohibit STRs. And anecdotally, a close personal friend of one of the neighbors in our subdivision just sold about $1.25 million house. He was planning to spend another $1 million on that house. He sold that and moved because he had an unfriendly STR operator next door. That is what we're trying to do to protect our neighborhood. Again, thank you for all your deliberations. You've been very, very considerate in everything you've done, trying to balance out the different things. Excuse me. There's nothing inherently wrong with STRs, okay? An STR is neither good or evil. And I want to be sure that you're clear that that pretty much represents the opinions of our subdivision. So whenever we say we're for or against something, it strictly relates to the property values we have. We've invested a lot of money in legal fees and some additional funds to protect our property values. Pretty much unanimously agree that the long-term property values will be stronger in a neighborhood where you don't have to wake up with an STR next door to you. And so again, we support what you've done. And so again, thank you very much for your time.
Any questions of Mr. Lamont? Thank you. That's all the names that have signed up to speak on this issue. Is there any other individual who'd like to come forward and speak on this issue? Please come forward and state your name and address and district, please.
I have no clue about my district. We own on Stearns Point.
Can you pull the mic down a little bit? Thank you.
We own on Stearns Point in Hamilton Harbor, and it's purely an investment to us, and we've been so pleased. He had a list for 20 years, and we walked into this particular condo and it met his list, and needless to say, we bought it. And what's bothering me is I didn't understand one thing you said about quantity of licenses. Are there quantities? You know, in the initial go-round, it was 700, and 300 and something had already been given, and this old lady woke up that day. And I had already gotten my A&P permit. I'd been paying my taxes. And as we found out about a month ago, I was returned an envelope from the license place, and my check, my application, everything were in it, and it had been through some machine for a very long time, and they were good enough to return it to me. I spoke to them, but I missed the deadline. So I think what I'm asking is quantity. Is there concern that there are only 350 more licenses available? I mean, do you be the first one in line when that happens, or? I want to meet exactly what y'all want.
Maybe I can address that. The ordinance that they're considering tonight, you're in a horizontal property regime at your condominium, and so your permit, should you acquire one, would not count against the cap.
Okay, thank you. We are very pleased. We've bought another lot recently, and to invest in your community, we are very happy to own property in Hot Springs. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come forward and speak on this issue? Please come forward.
My name is Ricky Rogers. I live at 407 Bauer Street. I'm in District 1. I had a question about just a comment about the preserving affordable housing. I feel like since where I live in uptown area, I don't feel like that area was used as the model for affordable housing, because the people that are moving there to buy those homes are people turning them into STRs. I mean, we've been there 8 years. I've never seen anybody move into our neighborhood just to move there and live. Most of the homes are fixer-uppers. Gary Meek owns 24 of them. They're abandoned, they're vacant. He's not doing anything with them. We've tried to buy multiple. He won't sell them. I just think that the different areas should be treated differently. Like the gentleman here who said that they couldn't sell the home, or the person that was wanting to buy the home, the next door house was an STR, so they wanted to get out. I just don't see that can happen in Park Avenue. I just wish it was treated differently for everybody. I was thinking too, like the last big board meeting when we all got to speak, 3 of the ladies were talking about just how much of a nuisance the STRs were, because people don't take out or they don't bring the trash cans back in, or there's too many people, too many cars. And my wife and I have always followed the rules. We've always had the exact number that we're supposed to have. We've never had more than that. We always take our trash cans back. And I wish it was treated, instead of like a conditional use permit, I wish it was treated where, like a driver's license. If people complain enough that your trash cans are out, you get a ticket. And if that just keeps happening, you have more people at your Airbnb than you're supposed to, you get a ticket, and finally you lose your license. I wish it was just treated that way so it's fair across the board and that we're all not lumped into, all STRs are bad. I mean, I don't know what you guys all believe, but I think they're really good for this city, and we work really hard to provide a great experience for our guests. We promote Hot Springs on a level that most of you probably don't even know. And we love it here, and we just want to continue to see it grow. And I think that I'm hoping that all the vacant homes in our area are bought by people. I mean, I want people to be able to buy them for long term. I just don't see it happening. And I just hope you guys consider that with preserving affordable housing, at least maybe the lake, maybe Oaklawn's different than uptown area. I hope you guys are, I'd like to know more about that, but I know you guys, I don't know, it's just kind of like, what's going on? Where are they getting this model from? I wish I knew. But if there's a way I can find out how you guys came up with that, I'd love to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I saw another hand up. Yeah, please come forward and state your name, address, and district, please.
Hi, John Cooksey, 428 Ramble Street, District 1. And I'm also a real estate agent in this town, and I am so proud of the growth of this town due to STRs. My goodness. Are we going to start doing excessive taxing on people that are improving neighborhoods, that are making things look better? Do you know how many people have come to me and said, I've come here in an STR, and I saw, well, they say, you know, VRBO or whatever, and they say, I really enjoyed it when we stayed. We decided to move here. We decided to retire here. And we have to ask ourselves, how much oppression do we want to put on people that are investing in this town? Now, it's $4 per bed for a hotel or motel. And now it's $100 per occupant, $1,000 a year, plus the $475 conditional use permit, plus the permit for the inspector that is not from the city. You have to pay for it yourself, from what I understand. And guess what happens? We didn't mention tonight. Your water can be shut off. Did you guys know that? Your water can be shut off. Is that not in the bill?
If you lose your certificate of occupancy.
Was that brought up tonight? I mean, how would you like it if you hire a lawyer and there's a discrepancy and the city decides, well, to go shut off his water while it's in court? I mean, why wasn't that, was that brought up at all tonight? It's in there. It was not brought up because that's a painful thing that nobody wants to look at. And that is the slippery slope of government intrusion into your own personal property. I'm not saying we can't litigate. You can get a lawyer. I can get a lawyer, but you can go back and forth. But in the meantime, your income could be interrupted while your water is shut off. And that's in that bill. Things keep getting added to this that worry me. Like I said, the inspector, the conditional use permit, the $100 per person. What are we doing? We have an eclipse coming up in 2024. Are you guys aware of that? This is the #1 place in the South people are coming. Do you remember what it was like when the Oaklawn racetrack on Derby Day, people would go to Benton? I had a STR back in 2008. I was one of 16 people. And I've since brought most of those back to monthlies. But, you know, you couldn't find a place in this town. Why send people to Benton? Why send people other places? Why have your water shut off? This is not an emergency. This bill needs to be thought of over a long period of time. Perhaps let the people do what they're doing, pay the $50 per bed, let them get their permit, and let's think about this seriously because the growth of this town has been amazing, and I like to keep it that way. Let's keep growing Hot Springs and providing a place for people to stay. Thank you.
Any questions of the speaker? Thank you. I think we just about hit everybody in the room. Please feel free to come forward. State your name, address, and district, please.
Hey, my name's Amelia Jarrell, 103 and 105 Edwards Place, and I believe it's District 4. I was trying to figure that out tonight. I just had a couple questions. I've been looking through the ordinances, what was posted online, and the only mention I've heard of a conditional permit is what this gentleman just spoke about. So I didn't know what all that entails, and I was wondering if there was a place I could find exactly what that means. And then my second question was, I heard you mention January 3rd earlier, and I could not hear you. I know there was an abeyance until October 13th, and then I heard you mention January 3rd, but I didn't hear in what context that was about.
Okay. This ordinance, if adopted, would extend the abeyance period until January the 3rd of 2022.
Okay.
The reference to the conditional use permit is cited in this ordinance. It gives you a code number.
Mhm.
All of our codes are online.
Okay.
You can go to the city's website,
Okay.
cityhs.net, and
Okay.
you can pull up that code section, and it will describe what is involved in the issuance of a conditional use application. In fact, you can have mine.
Thanks. So, just to follow up on that, so if the abeyance is extended until January 1st, would there be another vote possibly to extend it even further at that point? Or is there a deadline for whenever a final decision will be made?
Well, we have two things going on here tonight, or multiple. We got the ordinance, which
Right.
includes the abeyance.
Mhm.
So all that does is say we're not taking additional applications till January 3rd. We've got 400 applications to review and process and inspect, and we
Mhm.
can't add any more. So moving beyond January 3rd will be a game day decision in part.
Okay.
So we'll see where we're at, and if there's a need, just like we're looking at today, we're saying, wait, October 13th is next week. We need some more time. Hopefully, we're well down the road in processing these and doing all the inspections, so.
Okay, are those 300 applications, are those considering people who already have permits? Or are
Those
these in addition
people who
to?
applied, who during the kind of the open enrollment period
Mhm.
made application.
Okay, all right,
But,
thank you.
yeah.
That's all I
Are
have.
are you an STR now?
I'm not. We've actually recently purchased 2 properties in hopes to do that. And when we originally purchased them, we were told by the city that we would be able to submit an application on October 13th. So any further extension is just a loss of income.
Are you
for
living
us.
in one of them?
We are not.
And how are you renting them now?
We're not. We just recently closed on them a couple months ago, and so we were working to get them fixed up so that we were able to submit an application and be ready by October 13th. And then since that was extended, now we're just kind of in limbo. Mhm.
Very good, thank you. Any further individuals, any additional individuals like to speak on this issue? Thank you. Discussion amongst directors? Director Trustee?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I support this ordinance, and short-term residential rentals are a valued element of our economy in Hot Springs. I agree that the regulations are needed to address the issues that we see within the statement of purpose found on page 3 of this ordinance. And I won't read that first paragraph, but it talks about establishing a license process, regulating short-term and long-term, minimize negative secondary effects of short-term residential use or rental use, and then also addressing traffic, noise, and density. There are other things in there, but I'm sure you've all read that by now. I think legislation like this requires a balance between the property rights of the owners of the STRs and those of their neighbors. I think the policies and the rules and regulations set forth in this ordinance can achieve this objective by limiting the occupancy load to a reasonable number, enforcing the city's new noise ordinance, and strict adherence to the parking code and the solid waste ordinance. I also believe that a limit on the number of STRs within residential zoning districts is needed to help preserve the character of the neighborhoods and ensure availability of the affordable housing stock like we've talked about tonight. But I don't think that requiring conditional use permits is a warranted method by which to achieve this objective. Inherently, it's going to put neighbor against neighbor. It's going to place the board at risk, I think, of making what some might view as an arbitrary decision. And I think if we do our job as a city, as our staff and us as spokespersons for the city, We can educate the owners of STRs of what's required of them, what's required of their guests, and enforce compliance with these requirements. STR can be a good neighbor, as we've heard tonight. The proposed ordinance places a cap on the maximum number of STRs within residential zoning districts at 700. Maybe this number is too high. We've talked about it in several of our work sessions, but maybe it's too high to help preserve the character of neighborhoods and ensure the availability of that affordable housing stock. So as an alternative, I'd like to, and maybe as a compromise, I'd like to make a motion to amend this ordinance, O2145. I'd like to propose that we, on page 7, strike paragraph 8 in its entirety about the zoning certification letter. And on page 8, in paragraph E, I would propose that we lower the 700 number to 500 and strike the last sentence of that paragraph in its entirety. So paragraph E would read, the aggregate maximum allowable number of short-term residential rental businesses licensed for transient use sites located in the zoning districts R1, 2, 3, 4, and L, other than an HPR, should not exceed 500 per calendar year. And that's what I thought coming into this meeting, but it may be that we need to further talk about whether or not, in the case we've discussed, whether a fourplex can be converted to an STR or not. There may be additional amendments that need to be offered, but I would like to propose those two changes. So I move that we amend this with those two changes.
Okay, we have a motion to amend. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We got Director Holliday seconding. Discussion?
I'd like Brian Albright to explain that. What are we doing away with? What are we adding?
Okay. Page 7, paragraph 8, as he mentioned, that in essence is the provision that requires the conditional use permit process to be part of an application for an STR. So if that were stricken, no properties would be required to get a conditional use. And then on the following page, changing the cap in residential areas from 7 to 500. R1, R2, R3, R4, and RL, with the exception of horizontal property regimes. Cap would be 5 instead of 7.
I wouldn't have a problem with the going to 5. I would have a problem doing away with conditional use. As I said in the meeting before, we created this monster. I think we need to ride it till it's right. And that way, conditional use is heard by us. And I know that puts a workload on us. And if you ran for office and you were elected, then that's what you came here for, to do your job. And to hear those conditional use, because I think that STRs are needed in a lot of districts, like in District 1. I mean, most of those are. But Director Garcia's or Director Dobbs or my district, somebody buys the house next door and wants to make it an STR, I got nothing to say about it unless it's conditional use. I don't like that. I mean, it's not to say that I would come up against it if I met the person and, you know, everything was okay, but you have to remember, and like your district, Mr. Trustee, that would you want an STR next to you?
Just depends.
That's what I'm saying.
That's right.
But I'd like to hear it. You won't hear it if we don't do conditional use. It will not come to us. Planning department will say it's okay, and Ms. Selman's not here, and she's going to hear this, but I think planning department has a bad rap right now of just they pass everything that comes to them. They don't hardly ever turn anything down except for one that I can remember in your district on Malvern. I just want to hear it. I want to be able to hear it until we get this set, you know, whatever number it may be, and we may never get to 500.
Right.
And I would be in favor of, and I missed it, I'm sorry, I would be in favor of, you know, like the folks back there, they've got a house and they live downstairs and they rent the 2 rooms out upstairs, which is very possible, means they can't do it.
All right.
I don't think that's right. And I don't think we thought about that when we said 3-plex, 4-plex, or multifamily. We may be killing their business, and they moved here for this. So I'd be for your 500, but I wouldn't be for you doing away with conditional use, and I would be for pulling out the multifamily. I'm just going to amend no, we got to vote on this first.
Yeah, you can't amend an amendment.
Okay.
We'll have to ride that amendment to the ground first.
Any other comments from directors on the amendment, motion to amend? Here.
She's raising her hand.
Director
I will
Garcia.
after Director Garcia. Go ahead.
I too support the cap change, but I do have a question on the conditional use. As you stated, and as residents have stated, we do need to find a balance. And unless we could do something like Mr. Rogers had said, and that we brought up previously about having areas designated within the city, like we do for manufactured homes, that we have, that there's not a limit, and designating areas for pro-growth of STRs. And a lot of those are around Oaklawn and around the northern part of town that I don't hear the complaints. Someone else may have. But I do get complaints every week of other areas of town that have problems. I hate seeing our police department be the party police, going out and having to have, people can't even get in the driveway to their house because the STR's a party house that night, and the fire truck can't get down the street if there's an emergency or the ambulance. And so public safety's got to be first. So what is that balance when a property owner is wanting to convert or buy property to convert into STR? In the residents I hear from every week about these complaints, they want to know beforehand, and I think that was brought up on the residents on Sunday. They want to know this, and how without a conditional use. Is there any way for a neighborhood to appeal once one's been issued, or how would the residents in that neighborhood, would it just be through the violations if it was a problem property for parties and noise that continued to have violations, or how do neighbors know when that's going to happen?
Okay, I'm gonna maybe take those backwards. It sounded like you were talking about complaints about properties are you talking about ones that have already been licensed?
Well, it's just they're short-term rentals. Some of them are operating illegally. Some of them did put in their application.
Right.
It's a mixture of both.
Right.
But the most common violators are absentee owners. They may not even live in Arkansas.
Yes.
That are not adhering to the guidelines.
Okay.
So if there's going to be more in that neighborhood, the neighbors want to know about it because they're already complaining and having bad experiences.
Okay, so you're talking about the application process.
So if we don't have conditional use, is there a way that when an application is made that before it's approved, the little signs go up like the planning department puts out on other issues, or is there some process that neighbors could be notified?
Yes, ma'am. We talked about that September the 21st. You could, rather than having a conditional use permit, that is a use that runs with the land in perpetuity.
Yeah, that's a concern.
And it goes through the planning commission as a quasi-judicial determination. Let's remember what that is?
Yes.
That means you don't talk to these good
Right,
folks.
right.
Okay? You don't go out and you don't look. You don't go out, you don't listen. You make your, I mean, that's just the way it is. It's a quasi-judicial determination. So one of the things we talked about on the 21st was having a special
Yes.
use permit that would be more of an administrative approval process. However, decisions made by an administrative officer such as this, by law, are appealed to the BZA, not to you. And if someone's not happy with the decision that BZA would make, then they would go to court.
But this amendment does not include that.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No.
So I would be more apt to support it if it had that special, what you just said.
But do we want to load the court up?
Well,
That's maybe what happens, the court may be loaded up.
I think that what I'm hearing is, or feedback I've gotten, there are areas, as I mentioned, that nobody would protest. Nobody would be in opposition to it on Bower Street or other streets on Ramble Street, areas
They
off
may
of
be,
Park
but
or
we might
Oaklawn.
Less, yeah.
But yeah, there could be some, but based on current activities and feedback, it must be very low. However, in lake properties, there's complaints weekly. And the Sun Bay Drive has had a lot of issues. And we have the safety vehicles couldn't get down that street. We have parking issues that the fire truck couldn't get through. LifeNet couldn't get through. And we've had, I've had several where the property owners couldn't even get to their house because of improper parking. But I'm for lowering it, and I understand the complexities of the conditional use, but I would come more supporting the amendment if it included the other special process.
Can I jump in, please?
Director Holliday?
Okay, so a couple of things. So the conditional use, while I absolutely understand why a property owner would want to be aware or have an opportunity to communicate, I agree. The special use, I think that's why it came before us before, is it sort of met that need without being so much heavy lifting on everyone's behalf. Me being against the conditional use, it's not because I want to do less work here. It's not about that. It is the reality that anyone in Hot Springs can appeal any decision, and it's not necessarily the neighbor that has a bad experience. It could be somebody that just really doesn't think these things should exist at all anywhere, and they've never seen the property. And we're providing a mechanism for that, and I think that Director Trustee saying the phrase of pitting neighbor against neighbor, it does provide for that. That is not our job, nor is it the municipality's job to provide an opportunity, for neighbor to go against neighbor for any reason. Also, a lot of the issues that everyone seems to have with the bad property owners are addressed in all of the other things in this very large ordinance. We have the parking in here. We have huge fines. I mean, the fines in this are massive as far as I'm concerned. But if you have somebody who just doesn't care and they're going to let their tenants do whatever, they're not going to have someone on site. You talk about an absentee property owner, they still have to have someone here who's available almost immediately. If they cannot comply, all of a sudden this is very cost prohibitive. So there are mechanisms in place that it isn't going to necessarily discourage investment because, you know, like the residents in my district have said, you've got people who come and invest, and if there is a risk that somebody just has a chip on their shoulder about STRs and they might spend money and get all of the things going, and then all of a sudden they have no chance of being approved because, or there's just the risk. I mean, from a business standpoint, I can't imagine any of us would take that kind of a risk to buy a property and invest and move forward when there's a chance someone who doesn't know you, doesn't know your business, could take it out from under you because we have that process in place. I think this ordinance is incredibly strong with respect to dealing with poor property owners. Also, you know, we don't advertise when someone buys a property and makes it a long-term rental. I'm sure we've all lived next to a not so great renter for a year or more. You know, so, you know, that argument, while I find it valid, I don't find it heavy enough to include in this because you really don't ever know what your neighbor's gonna do when they buy the property next door. And the things that you have available are, you know, the other health and safety ordinances that we have, which is what this is intended to be. So I am completely for getting rid of the conditional use. I have been all along. You know, I appreciate the statement that Director Trustee said, and I think that it's just, it's completely unnecessary when you consider everything else. You know, if we didn't have everything else in here, then yes, because there wouldn't be recourse, but there is recourse. And we're hiring 3 additional people in the city to manage that. So, so anyway, I think it needs to go. Personally, I don't have a problem with the special use permit and the BZA component, so that if in fact there is a real issue of compatibility, that there is at least something there. But I think as it stands, I really think that conditional use needs to go. As far as the cap and the conditional use, I am only for the cap going down if the conditional use goes away. I think that, I don't think that lowering the cap, especially to that extent, without another consideration, that's not something that I would be for at all.
Yeah. Director Garcia?
I agree with your comments there. The other concern I had on conditional use was it stays with the property forever. And that has been a concern, but I do favor the special use process. But the other feedback I've gotten as to why neighbors want to know, because with a long-term rental, the residents there become part of the neighborhood. And they get involved with the neighborhood watch, and they get involved with the block parties. And so feedback I've gotten is why they wanted to know is because they've had so many come into their neighborhood already. They're already at over 25%. They've got 28% STRs in their neighborhood. And so they're losing the character. And if everybody starts selling, as the gentleman from Sun Bay Drive mentioned, people start selling and leaving, then they've lost their whole neighborhood when it started with just one. So every neighborhood in the city takes on its own character, and that is what the residents are complaining about that. And that's why they wanted to know. And if they just had a process where they, like this special use or the appeal through the BZA, or had an avenue, then they would be more comfortable, I believe, in accepting that, because they're already seeing such a change in their neighborhood as it is now. And last year during COVID, Hot Springs didn't suffer as much as a lot of cities here in Arkansas. And I do believe that the STR that we had operating at that time contributed heavily to that, because a lot of hotels were empty, and people felt more comfortable for safety having a STR where they and their family could be there and not have to worry about going into a restaurant, and it contributed to our city's economy, as well as the people that are taking care and operating and owning and managing those STRs. And we've spent a lot of time researching, and I know we had questions, how did all of this come about? But I know we've been to classes on short-term rentals, the Arkansas Municipal League, and sharing with sister cities across the state, the National League of Cities, and in August, I participated in an online Zoom workshop that Airbnb presented to the National League of Cities. And like I said, every city has their own characteristics and what's important, but we have to have a balance between all of our neighborhoods. Like you said, every neighborhood is not the same, and we don't want to squelch growth or economics for people coming in and being entrepreneurs and rebuilding neighborhoods that were dilapidated or were, this couple did take a property that was going to be condemned, and now it's not only very nice property, they've expanded on that and give this experience and promote Hot Springs. It ties right into Northwoods and what we want to promote for others to come to Hot Springs. But there are, by no neighborhood being the same, it's very difficult to find that balance. And that's what I think all of us want. And there's no one answer. There's no wrong or right. It's trying to get what will work the best for everyone concerned. And that's what we'll be continually working on this if something's not right. If we pass this emergency, there will be, I don't believe the city, the departments are ready, and the systems aren't ready at this time, and that's a major reason that this is having to be pushed out for the abeyance. And if other changes needed to be made before January, there is time to address those on anything that we get wrong. Is that correct?
Generally speaking, yes. You know, part of the reason for the need behind the abeyance being extended is so that our platform through Granicus, the host compliance, can take into account your final rules. We needed this. We needed to know what the final rules were going to be before we finalized our platform with host compliance.
Any other comments from directors?
I have some.
Director Dobbs-Smith, please.
First of all, I'd like to start off with the 700 being reduced to 500. I'm not in agreement with that because for a couple of reasons. For one thing, I think we're getting close to the number, and there are a lot of people who have purchased properties. There's a lot of people who missed the deadline, and I think that might be a hindrance to people to do that. The conditional use has nothing to do with density. I mean, the conditional use has to do with whether or not a residential neighborhood has a say-so on whether or not a business can come into their neighborhood. A quick sampling, I've looked, not quick, a lengthy sampling of other cities. I don't know the size, a lot of them were larger, but they all had conditional use. Conditional use right now, unless we come up with some sort of a special license that would be appealed to the Board of Directors. The BZA is not elected. The Board of Directors are elected. The BZA are appointed, and a lot of people don't even know what BZA stands for. So BZA is not where I would like to see an appeal if I had a problem. As to the issue of turning neighbor against neighbor, how many of you have had conditional use applications in your neighborhood? My neighborhood has had dozens. It's in one case, I know one neighbor got kind of aggravated over one, but in most cases, it's people from outside the area. They want to come in and put a business in their home, and they're denied. We had someone who wanted to put in a nursing home, or not a nursing home company of some sort, put a big sign right in our neighborhood, and our neighborhood said no. But for the most part, our neighborhood stands together and says we don't want business in our residential neighborhood, where we have a cohesive neighborhood that has neighbors that know neighbors, that look after neighbors, that have neighborhood watch. And I don't think at this point putting it with BZA would be helpful at all. I'm also thinking that in the time that I've been on the board and the 30 years I've been watching board meetings, I don't remember that many. I mean, there are from time to time, there are appeals that come to the board, but it's not like every month with the Planning Commission. It's a fairly rare thing, and but a few of the times that I've seen them come here, the people who came, I know Director Holliday was concerned about someone just complaining because they don't like STRs. Well, if they come to us and say, I just don't like STRs, I don't want it in my neighborhood, that's not, we're gonna vote against them. We're gonna vote for the STR, because that's an unreasonable request to deny it just because you live somewhere else or you live next door and you just don't like it. But the conditional use is the only way that I can see at this point where we can notify neighbors of a business coming into their residential neighborhood. If you're in a neighborhood that doesn't care, then they won't complain and they won't protest it. The other thing that's in there is several people spoke about the multiple rooms within homes. I don't know why we should deny that. I mean, that's not hurting affordable housing, and that is hurting someone from making some extra money. So that's all I've got to say for now.
Director Jones, you and I are the only two that haven't
I know
spoken.
it, and I'm just sitting here.
She doesn't have any STRs in her district.
No, I got
21.
Yeah, I got one.
Tonight we're ordinance 021-45 seeks to amend two ordinances that were already approved, 6375 and 6382. So what that tells me is that while we have something before us, it may not ever be the end. It's a process. We've had meetings in the past, and we had comments made a couple weeks ago or so as we looked at what we considered to be the final version, that we can always come back at another time and make changes. So I guess I'm at that point. We can always come back at another time and make changes. Director Weatherford, 2 weeks ago or so, when we had our final work session on this, and Director Dobb Smith, they both kind of made similar type comments that, there may be an initial wave of conditional use appeals to the board, and that wave, will go down. It we'll process those, and then maybe there's an opportunity to take a look at another process. The maximum number of 700 to 500, there again, we're sitting here trying to make, in 3 months is January 3rd, it's January 5th now, so so we can readdress that. You know, what pains me is that we do have people who have spent money to buy property. They missed a deadline. They've extended themselves and financially, and now they're kind of in a wait and see. I'd hate to reduce the number today. I don't know how that helps me on January 3rd, but reduce the number today and with the possibility that they may not be one of the top 175 or 200 or 135, whatever number we're going to, if when we really boil everything out of the pan, what's left of those that are really within the city, within a residential area that count towards the cap. So right now I'm in a position that I want to support what was on the agenda at this time. So
Can I ask a question real quick?
pardon?
I'd like to ask a question.
Please.
I don't know if you have the answer, but one of the changes is that those properties that are part of a horizontal property regime do not count towards the cap. Do we know how many of that original 360, 380? Do we know if it's a couple or if it's like half of them? Do we have any idea?
It would be a guess. I didn't take part in the data collection, so I don't know.
Okay, because just kind of to your point, making the number so small that people miss out, but if half were no longer counted towards the cap, that's, you know, it just kind of changes it a little bit.
Well, like you just said, though, we have, and maybe somebody at City Hall has that number, but until we get some of this refined a little bit, and we'll have better information on which we can make future decisions. So,
How does that change our communication with Granicus and that process? You know, if we continue to have this be an organic process?
It depends on the nature of those changes. We're set to deal with Granicus on the basis of what's being proposed to you this evening. If you made changes tonight, we would have an opportunity to get those changes implemented with Granicus. If the changes are made in December, it's a little more difficult because you can't move as quickly.
But if they're made after January 3rd?
If they're made after January 3rd, and it's after the abeyance period has been lifted, and you have applications that are now pending, people have made those applications or made investments in reliance upon your established ordinance, that presents more of a problem.
Mayor.
Yes, City Manager Bureau.
You know, one of those, I think, if there's changes after we get Granicus set up and running, and they're very close. You know, they're waiting on a final ordinance to finish some of the initial setup for our account and those that we are regulating. There's probably ways that we'll be able to have changes and make changes. It's the emergency clause. Once we get past January 3rd, I think that would be the problem. If there was a change after January and they had time to go in and make those changes and write whatever code's going to be needed, we could probably accommodate. But, you know, coming out emergency clause after January 3rd, I think it's going to be difficult for them to meet that because there's a substantial amount of code writing that has to come for these changes.
Well, I'm not suggesting, at least from my comments, that we would not do the emergency clause tonight, that we would do the emergency clause tonight.
No, I think it's after January 3rd. If there's additional changes, once we get this set up, it's going to be difficult for them to go in and make those changes in a short amount of time. And I think your emergency clause tonight is great.
Director Weatherford?
I'll go back to something you said. Our problem is, one of the problems, I think, is that we created this ordinance, we've been working on it for some time. But it didn't stop people coming to town and buying property thinking they were gonna be doing STRs, and I know of at least 4 properties that people have purchased that thought they were gonna be able to do STRs, and they've made substantial investments in this property to do STRs, and I know of at least 10 people that are wanting to buy properties, but now are afraid to buy properties because they may not be able to do an STR. And they're not in District 1, they're in other places, District 4, 5, and I don't think any in 6. But 4 and 5, I know of at least 14 cases that they're just stuck. Some of them made investments, some of them want to make investments, and I think we want those folks to make investments in our community. And I don't know where we are. I mean, it's just maybe you can clarify.
Well, I just wanted to say that regarding the cap, I do support a lower cap. When we set it at 700, we thought it was going. At that time, we didn't have any idea, and we thought it was going to be over 500. And in the residential areas, it's 300 and something. And when we get the division of what's excluded from that cap, it may be even less. When you look at the research across the cities in Arkansas, across the United States, the size city we are, right now we're very high for the number on our cap. Cities 3 times our size are in that range. So when you look at it, there are cities also not allowing any more STRs, just what was grandfathered in, and no one else can get licensed because they could not get enough housing for workers in the city. So there's a overall a balance that's needed, but we also need to consider the investment that everyone else in the neighborhood's already made in their neighborhood. And if they lose the whole character of their neighborhood and their neighbors start selling their properties and leaving, we lose population. We lose, it's not win-win. So every neighborhood is different, and if we're not going to do it by designated areas, then we have to get a compromise and reach a balance the best we can. We're not going to get 100% of the people happy, it doesn't look like, but I do support lowering the residential cap. And remember, there's other zones that you can have as many as you want. There's no cap in any of our commercial corridors. And in the condos that the city attorney mentioned, it doesn't mean that's a cap on everything, but with the great realtors we have in the city, they can find properties that can be invested in, and I don't foresee our cap being reached with the new apps by January.
Mr. Burrow, do you know how many of these applications are considered in residential areas, and how many applications we received?
Mayor, I don't have that in front of me. We had somewhere around 376 licensed that were in R1, 2, 3, 4, and RL. I believe it was 376. We don't know how many are still out there because we haven't received any additional applications. I'm sure there are some. Again, some of those may be an HPR and a POA in an area that's going to be governed by another board other than our ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments from directors?
I got a question of Mr. Albright. The STRs that we have now that are been in business, are they grandfathered in when this all takes effect? don't they have to come back and do all the inspections and everything? They actually may not be an STR at the end?
They are a pre-existing, non-conforming use with respect to a conditional use permit. However, if they have not already received their certificate of occupancy for such use, they have to go through the annual inspection. They all go through the annual inspection in order to get their certificate of occupancy. They will not receive a renewal without that.
So some of them that are in business may not be renewed.
It's possible. It's also possible that, between March and May, there really weren't a lot of rules at all, right? You just had to get the license.
Or just get the application.
I understand that there were some licenses that were issued for addresses where there was no structure.
Right.
So we don't know what the number is. Of the ones that are licensed, it's probably lower than the total number that we know of. However, we don't know how many are operating out there without a license or who are waiting with bated breath to do so.
Right.
Well, like I said before, when Mr. Trustee made his motion, that I could go for the 500. I could even do away with the conditional use, but I think we need to do away with the threeplex, fourplex, multifamily, because if you're lowering it to 500, that automatically kind of cuts your number for long-term rental.
Sounds like we have basically three issues that we need to discuss. Right now, we do have a motion and a second to amend, as Director Trustee stated. Unless he's willing to withdraw his motion, we need to vote that up or down so that we can move on to other discussion, Mayor.
If there's, which we certainly wanted to provide ample opportunity for every director to speak, even you, Director Jones, and you yielded to others. So if we have no further discussion, we're going to vote on the motion to amend by Director Trustee, which eliminated the paragraph 8 on conditional use and reduced the maximum from 700 permits to 500.
So we're voting on two items.
Well, it's one vote on that has two parts to it. So conditional use would be stricken, and was part of that motion to replace with the special permit.
No, it wasn't.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Not yet.
And then the 500 was the cap being reduced from 700 to 500. So, please call the roll.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Jones.
No.
Dobbs Smith.
No.
Weatherford.
No.
Mayor McKay.
No. Amendment is defeated. We're back to the regular ordinance 02145. When we already had a motion to and a second to approve that.
Right. Mayor, we did have discussion with respect to page 7, paragraph 8. Maybe that's a good place to start. Is there any interest in amending the conditional use permit process to a special use application through the planning department?
I could go for that, and I'll make that motion if you want me to.
Well,
Or do we need to discuss it?
well, let me, if you don't mind, let me phrase it for you. So paragraph 8 in that event would read, in the event that the zoning certification letter indicates that the proposed transient use site of such short-term residential rental is situated within zoning districts R1, R2, R3, R4, or RL, other than a horizontal property regime, the applicant owner shall be required to obtain a valid special use permit issued by the Planning and Development Director or his or her designee as promulgated by the city manager. A link to the application and instructions for such special use permit will be made part of the online portal established by the city and on the city's website. Does that meet your satisfaction for purposes of your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do you so move?
Yes, sir. So moved.
So we got
Is that the only thing you're putting in?
No,
No,
I
there
would
was
like,
one
I'd
other.
like to do the.
Let's do one at a time.
Okay.
Because what I
Then
find
what happens is it
what
gets
I
defeated
find is that
because-
you know a couple of you agree on something, but you don't agree on the others.
That's right.
Right. So moved.
So we got a motion on the, by Director Weatherford, as eloquently stated by the city attorney, to have a special use permit in the short version, special use permit. We need a second.
I will second that.
We get Director Holliday seconded. Any discussion? Director
Just a
Trustee.
question, Ron, where does it talk about, or should it talk about in this paragraph about the board of the BZA?
That's established by law. If there's a determination made by an administrative hearing officer, it goes to BZA. That's found.
And that's on
in-
page 10.
Pardon?
That's on page 10 in for any person who has denied.
That is a fact.
Okay.
Same,
And it's in here.
same provision.
Okay.
Same
thing.
provision. Yes, sir.
All right. Wanted to be sure.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, let's see, so we have Director Weatherford made the motion on a special use permit, and Director Holliday made the second. Any further discussion?
Does that mean that does away with the conditional use?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
But then change. the
Replaces it.
Cap.
That's gonna be another motion. He wants to do this one at a time.
All right.
Y'all
Any
are
further
bargaining with
discussion
each
amongst
other.
the
Let's
board?
try.
Can the public comment, ask a question on a motion? I mean, an amendment?
Not really, we're beyond that. We appreciate you, though. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Repeat that motion.
They were replacing paragraph 8 on page 7 as it relates to the term conditional use permit, and replacing it with special use permit, basically, is what we're doing there. Please call the roll.
Director Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs Smith.
No.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
No. Amendment passes. So now what are we going to do? Have another one on the cap?
Yeah,
Right.
Director Trustee can make it, or I'll make it, or if he feels like it, or
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we reduce the number from 700 to 500. Do we want to go ahead and put the other part in there?
Yes, sir, I think we do, because there's no longer a conditional use permit, so it doesn't make any sense to have the rest of that sentence there. So it would, in essence, be similar to what he previously made. You're asking that it be changed from 7 to 500 and deleting the last sentence of the first paragraph under E.
Which is the,
Conditional use
okay. But
permits.
do we want to add the other part
going-
that I wanted to put in there, since we're doing it down to 500, do we want to do are we going to make that another motion?
I'd rather you do one thing at a time,
Okay.
because I think y'all are going to start
I
bargaining
so
again.
moved that.
So basically, what we're doing here on page 8, we're just replacing 700 with 500.
Second.
Yes.
So we
Well,
got-
and deleting that last,
Pardon?
and deleting that
Deleting that
last sentence.
Yeah, deleting the conditional use.
No
Starting
longer
with provided
applicable, because-
further.
Yeah, it's no longer
Provided further
applicable,
doesn't
so
apply
we-
any longer.
Right.
Strike that last part.
Right.
Yeah. Correct.
Okay.
So we're going from 700 to 500, and we're deleting reference to conditional use permit within that paragraph.
Right.
Okay? Any comments or discussion on that? Please call the roll.
Holliday.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs Smith.
No.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
No. Amendment passes.
Now I'll make a motion that we do away with the multifamily, the triplex, fourplex, multifamily, since we've lowered it to 500.
I don't like that.
I believe that would be section 4B, paragraph 3, eliminating the last sentence.
Yeah, on page 4,
You strike it.
Right, strike that last,
striking the last
last
sentence.
sentence.
Where are we at, please?
Page
4B,
4B3,
3.
last sentence of B3.
B3.
Where it says no multifamily dwelling.
Well, yeah, provided further, no multifamily dwelling
Strike that.
structure.
And I'll second.
Now, that's when the place got an upstairs and
Duplex, threeplex, fourplex, multifamily upstairs, as the folks over there have a
Yeah,
house
that's-
and they've got a room down, they got rooms upstairs for rent, that means they can do that, and it's to be legal,
Now,
right?
do you have a motion and a second for that? You have a
Yes.
second?
Mhm.
Okay. The only caveat I want to share with this is that zoning is still zoning, okay? And so, for example, Ms. Spargo's property, R3, it's not R4. Multifamily is not allowed in an R3. Hers is allowed because it's a pre-existing non-conforming use. It's grandfathered, as everybody talks about. So I just want to make sure you understand that if it's not a lawful pre-existing non-conforming use, it's not going to help them, okay? You have to have a lawful pre-existing non-conforming use, like 735.
So each of these new, so let's say Ms. Spargo's property that's now 4 units, each of those would have to have an additional permit, correct?
Yes.
An additional special use permit.
Yes.
And right now, I don't want to talk about, some of them won't qualify or some of them might fall out. Right now, we have 376. We just lowered it to 500. That leaves 124 by the way I'm counting, and there goes 4 of them for Ms. Spargo back here. So that lets out a lot of folks who have already bought property and invested in property or plan to buy property, and that was why I wasn't for the cap. So,
Well, she would have to make application and be approved and pass all the inspections
Right.
before it could happen. And there may be somebody else in front of her that gets that before she gets it.
I'm just saying, you talk about bad will amongst
Well,
neighbors,
this is
cutting down that
something that
many.
like we talked about a minute ago, we can come back and change. I mean, if we don't like the special permit, and we want to do conditional use, I guess we could come back and make that condition. We could do almost anything.
we
Right or
can
wrong.
change the
I
whole
mean,
thing.
yes, you can.
Director
I
Garcia?
just- Oh, I'm sorry.
Director Garcia?
Thank you. I just wanted, in her, Ms. Spargo's testimony, she was not looking to apply for 4. She has long-term rentals. So that doesn't mean it's instantly 4. She wanted the option to be able in the future, is what she said.
And if there's only 124 left, then what are her
That's
chances?
on an annual basis.
I'm just saying.
Well, but I think of all of the things that we're changing or could possibly change after this magical January 3rd date, the cap is the easy one, as far as the way that an applicant is going to have to engage with the system online that we have. The cap is the easy one. It's the actual regulations surrounding the application. And so, yes, if all of a sudden on January 4th, we hit 524 hours, I think we'll absolutely be here having another conversation in order to make room. I have a question, though, about the multifamily. It's back to sort of what, and I can't find where in this it is, but the single permit per
Yeah, that's on
parcel.
page 6. Can we handle that that's not part of the motion right now?
No, it's not, but assuming this motion passes, we then need to address that as well, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So right now, we're on page 4, item B3, and the elimination of the provision that references no multifamily dwelling structure. Any other questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Director Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs Smith.
Aye.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye. Amendment is adopted. or
Mayor,
approved.
as Director Holliday mentioned, page 6, paragraph 14 deals with one license per lot or parcel. Given the amendments that have been made, it would seem appropriate for this to be deleted as well.
We need a motion to strike paragraph 14 on page 6.
Can I ask a question before I make that motion?
Yes.
And I have to go back. So in what we have just done by removing multifamily, okay, I think it's fine. I'm just thinking of, in the future, if someone were to build an accessory building in a residential area, or that it's that expansion.
Right.
Because one thing that I think we don't want to have happen is all of a sudden, someone has a big yard and they have 4 little houses out of nowhere.
Right, and so you won't be able to expand.
Okay.
And with respect to multifamily, again, if it's new construction, if it's not something that's a pre-existing non-conforming use,
Right.
i.e. grandfathered, that's not going to be able to go into R1, R2,
Right,
R3,
right.
or RL anyway.
I'm just thinking of putting a secondary structure on a single parcel.
Mhm.
But that is covered by the may not be expanded in paragraph 3, B3.
Yes.
Okay. Then, back to page 6, I will make the motion to strike, what is it?
Page 6.
Yeah,
Page
page 6, section 14, I'm trying to see, what is it, C14?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a motion to strike on page 6,
Second.
paragraph C14. We got a second by Director Jones. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Director Dobbs Smith.
Aye.
Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye, amendment is approved. Now we're back to approving the ordinance as amended.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Albright, you want to review, let's see, the amendments that we did approve?
Oh, my goodness.
Or,
He said, don't y'all remember?
yeah, we took out multifamily dwelling,
Yeah.
and we took out the last one we just did, is on page.
Mayor, if you don't mind, I'll have the city clerk who was taking minutes of those
Yeah.
motions.
that
All right,
would
the
work.
motions that have been approved so far, we removed the term conditional use, replacing that with special use, page 7, paragraph 8. We reduced the total cap from 700 to 500. On page 4, we struck the last sentence of B13, which was the limitation on multifamily dwelling. And most
B3.
recently, the last motion on page 6.
B3.
B3, I'm
it
sorry.
was.
Oh, okay.
On the multifamily dwelling was B3.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
And then the last motion on page 6, paragraph 14. Where, yes.
That was stricken, yeah.
So
right.
those are the changes to what was published.
All All right.
One of the things we can change if we decide to, right? Right, attorney?
So now we need to call the roll on the ordinance as amended. No?
I'm sorry, I was shaking my head at her.
Okay.
You have a motion on the floor to adopt that has been amended.
Correct.
So you just need to vote on the motion as amended.
Thank you. As amended 4 times. Please call the roll.
Director Weatherford.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Trustee.
Aye.
Holliday.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Dobbs Smith.
No.
Mayor McCabe.
Aye. Ordinance is adopted.
Mayor, there is an emergency clause found in Section 8, which I'll read in its entirety. Section 8, emergency clause, the adoption of this ordinance is essential to the public health, safety, and welfare of the inhabitants and visitors of the city of Hot Springs. Emergency is therefore declared to exist, and this ordinance shall be in full force and effect from and after the time of its passage. That concludes the reading of the emergency clause. If you would, entertain a motion second to adopt.
So moved.
Director Weatherford made the motion, seconded by Director Trustee. All in favor of the emergency clause signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Unanimous. Emergency clause is adopted. That was the last action item of the evening. Board of Directors' items for discussion.
Can I just say I'm really proud of us?
Why?
Well, that was kind of awesome that just happened, so we're good.
All right.
Stick around.
Anybody else have item for discussion?
Mayor, I would just like to point out that Oaklawn set the over and under on tonight's meeting at 8:50, so if you could talk for just a little bit longer.
You got some money
Where's
on
your
that?
bet,
Well, we had 2 people sign up on the public comment section, which we felt they were really on the what we call public commentary after the meeting closed. We took the liberty to move them to the appropriate section on this last issue relating to the short-term rental ordinance. So unless those 2 people are still here, but if you want to have additional public comment, it doesn't help Brian's cause of getting to 8:50, but we can certainly do so. So if there's no further business to come before the board, Director Jones?
Well, I move that we adjourn the meeting for the night, Mayor.
Very good. We're going to adjourn. Anybody got a second?
8:22.
All in favor?
Aye.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. At the same time, we'll switch over and we'll